The police suddenly said, "We've quickly taken a child found in the car to the hospital. You're under arrest." I was shocked when they showed up at my house and couldn't believe what they were saying. "What? I don't have a child," I replied, confused. The officer looked confused too. They said they found the car's owner through the license plate and it was registered in my name. Could this be true? I had a feeling, so I rushed to the hospital where the child was taken. There, I saw a boy about 5 years old lying on an emergency bed. His face was red and rough, but my heart raced when I saw his familiar face. From that moment, my life changed completely with this child at the center. I am Emily, a 33-year-old who works from home. I started dating my husband, Michael, when we were in college together in the same club, and we got married after graduation. We've been married for 10 years but couldn't have children. We even tried fertility treatments, but I found out I had a condition that made it hard to conceive. Michael, being kind-hearted, told me, "It's okay. Let's live happily, just the two of us." My in-laws are nice, and since my brother-in-law already had a child, they never pressured me. But I felt bad for my parents, who were hoping for grandchildren. I live near them and visit often. If only my brother John had a child. I have a younger brother, John, who is 7 years younger than me. Maybe because he was the youngest, he started hanging out with bad influences in middle school. He says it's because our parents compared him to me, the smarter and more accomplished older sister. But from my perspective, our parents treated us equally. Still, John rebelled and caused a lot of trouble. At 20, he said he was cutting ties with the family and left home, disappearing without a trace. I haven't seen him since then. Sometimes I look through old photo albums and remember the days when John, as a toddler, would follow me around, calling me sis. One day, while I was working from home, my doorbell rang nonstop. I panicked and checked the camera, seeing the police at my door. They suddenly announced, "We've transported a child found in a car. You're under arrest." I was shocked and speechless. "What? I don't have a child," I said. The officer looked just as confused. I had so many questions. The police explained that a passerby had noticed a car abandoned on the road with a limp child inside and reported it. The child was taken by ambulance to the emergency room. When I asked where the car was, they said it was in front of my parents' house. Unfortunately, my parents were away on a trip. The police identified the car's owner from the license plate. While the car was registered in my name, the person using it was my younger brother, John. I used to lend my car to John when he got his license, and he took it when he left home. Since then, the car has been left in front of my parents' house only when it needed inspection and maintenance. Despite scolding him, my parents felt sorry for John and took care of the car, thinking he might need it. But who was the child left behind in the car? Hurrying to the hospital, I approached the bed in the emergency room and saw just the top of a small head peeking out from a blanket. The curly, wavy hair instantly reminded me of someone. My heart raced as a childhood memory of John flashed before my eyes. Getting closer, I saw the face of a boy around 4 to 5 years old who looked strikingly like John. Could it be? Just then, I received a phone call from my mother, who was away and sounded panicked. John called and asked me to take care of his child. He said he left the child in the car because we were not home. Under this blazing sun, what should we do? I reassured my worried mother that the child had already been taken to the hospital and seemed likely to survive. She sounded relieved and said she would be back soon. I understood my mother's feelings. There was no time for a trip now. I knew this child was my brother's. But when was he born, and who is his mother? I explained to the police that he was probably my brother's child and decided to stay with the boy. After that, I tried calling my brother several times, but couldn't reach him. Looking at the child, he seemed to be in pain. Seeing such a small body enduring so much hurt broke my heart. At that moment, a nurse came and handed me the clothes the child had been wearing before changing into hospital pajamas. They were worn out and very dirty, with the name Tom written on the tag. From his extreme thinness and the state of his clothes, it was clear that Tom had been living in a very tough situation. That evening, my mother returned from her trip and rushed to the hospital. "John," she murmured, holding Tom tightly with tears in her eyes. Tom looked a lot like John. By the next day, Tom's condition had improved, but he seemed very scared. I gently asked him, trying not to scare him, "How old are you, Tom?" "I'm 5 years old," he replied, holding out one hand and counting his fingers. Wow, you speak so clearly. I praised him and stroked his head, and he smiled for the first time. Still, Tom seemed thin, pale, and small. The doctor said he had bruises all over his body. I convinced the police to let us take care of Tom until we could reach John, and somehow managed to avoid filing an official report. 3 days later, Tom was ready to leave the hospital. I didn't want him wearing his old, ragged clothes, so I bought him new ones and dressed him in them. He looked even smarter and cuter in his fresh outfit. As we were leaving the hospital, I finally managed to get through to John on the phone, but there was a lot of noise on the other end. How could you leave him in the car under the blazing sun? He ended up in the hospital, I shouted in frustration. He survived, didn't he? So it's fine, John replied casually. He had bruises all over his body. Did you do this? I demanded. Thomas is clumsy. I was just teaching him discipline, John retorted, showing no remorse. I was speechless. He's only 5 years old. He's struggling. He can't even remember his letters no matter how many times I try to teach him. It's frustrating, so I left him at our parents' house. I was shocked by my brother's harsh words about his own son. Considering it might be best for Tom not to be with such a parent, I was even more appalled when John added, "I'm in the middle of a casino jackpot right now," and abruptly hung up the phone. Seeing Tom, who looked visibly worried, begin to silently shed tears, I gently said, "It's going to be okay," and comforted him by stroking his head. At 5 years old, it's natural to feel scared and cry, but he didn't seem to be asking for his dad or mom, which struck me as unusual. I couldn't help but wonder why, and it pained my heart. After discussing with Michael and my parents, we decided that Tom would stay with us at our home. At home, I prepared a kid-friendly lunch with hamburgers and fries, adorned with colorful character flags. When I set the plate in front of Tom, his eyes lit up. "I've never seen food like this before. Can I really eat it?" he asked. "Of course, Tom. I made it just for you," I assured him. I loved watching him eat, with ketchup all over his mouth and a big, crunchy smile. In the evening, Tom had a blast playing in the bath with Michael, laughing and having a great time. At bedtime, I'd read him picture books while lying next to him. He listened attentively with sparkling eyes, but sometimes he'd look at me with a worried look. "Can I stay here forever? I don't want to go back home anymore," he pleaded one night. "I understand. You want to stay here with us, right?" I asked gently. Tom nodded with relief, and it broke my heart to see him feeling that way. As the days passed, he grew even closer to me and Michael. He'd offer to help fold laundry or try to carry my shopping bags with his little body when we went out. Living together, I discovered what a kind and wonderful child Tom was. Michael and I grew very attached to him, and we began discussing the possibility of adopting him, especially if John and his partner weren't planning to raise him. When I checked with the city office, I learned that my brother and his wife had registered Tom's birth, and according to their address records, they were living with Tom at our parents' house. We started the process of consulting with family court about adoption. About a month after Tom came to live with us, John and a young woman came to visit. "Hey, thanks for taking care of Tom, lol," John said casually. "I don't want to go back," Tom whispered, quickly hiding behind me. He must have had some frightening experiences. It had been years since I'd seen my brother, and he looked more confrontational than ever, with disheveled clothes. The young woman with him, who introduced herself as Riza, had multiple piercings in her ears and nose and dressed flamboyantly. "How did you find out where I live?" I asked, puzzled. "Mom told me. By the way, sis, you're living in a nice house and having a great life, huh?" "I have something to discuss about Tom." "Let me in," John said. I felt uneasy, but I couldn't refuse when it was about Tom. According to my brother, he had married this woman shortly after leaving home. They had been moving around a lot, and there were times when they lived in their car because they had nowhere else to go. While he looked around my house, my brother suddenly got to the point. "I heard from Mom that you don't have any children, right? You've been married for 10 years with no kids, so maybe you can't have any," he said. "What are you trying to say?" I asked, feeling a sense of foreboding. "We have a great idea. If you want Tom, how about it? But it won't be for free," he said bluntly. I was shocked by John's audacity, trying to sell his own son for money after previously trying to leave him with our parents out of annoyance. I was filled with anger. "John, do you realize what you're saying? Tom is not some object to be sold." What? Acting all righteous now. I rebelled because of your seriousness. Our parents always favored you, John sneered. It's ridiculous to blame our parents and me for your own choices. Shut up. Just give me the money, John demanded, raising his hand as if to strike me. In that moment, Tom, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward. He stretched out his arms, trying to shield me from John. Seeing this, I felt even more determined to protect Tom. John, selling your own child for money is absolutely wrong, I stated firmly. Despite my initial outrage, I decided to give them the $13,400 I had saved in my dresser as a settlement. I also had them sign an agreement that they would have no further involvement with Tom and obtained their consent for the adoption. John's wife callously remarked, "It's a relief not to have to deal with such a troublesome child," shocking me with her indifference. Once the paperwork was finalized, they took the money, smirked, and vanished. From that moment on, Tom truly became our son, and we completed all the necessary legal procedures. The days that followed were filled with happiness. Tom thrived and grew healthy, and as a couple, we found our lives enriched with smiles and joy thanks to him. During this time, we began to notice Tom's talents and were eager to nurture them. However, 15 years later, another incident unfolded when my younger brother and his wife paid us a visit. John now sported a scruffy beard, messy hair, and looked much older than his 41 years. His wife appeared disheveled, with no makeup, wearing dirty clothes and torn plastic sandals. It was clear they were going through tough times and living a rough life. I had a sinking feeling because their visit couldn't bring anything positive, and unfortunately, my dependable husband Michael was at work that day. "What brings you here?" I asked cautiously. "I need some money," John replied bluntly. "Why should I give you any money?" I countered, feeling uneasy. "I'm surprised. I thought Tom was just a dumb kid, but he got into a top medical school, didn't he?" John said, revealing he had heard about Tom through someone in our neighborhood at a local tavern. In reality, Tom was very bright. He had excelled in school since elementary years and earned admission to a prestigious medical program right after high school. "That's no longer your concern," I said firmly. "It's a big deal. He's my son. And since he turns out to be such a great kid, I thought I'd take him back," John stated. "What?" I exclaimed, shocked by his audacity. "If you don't like it, how about you give me $33,500, John suggested. "Didn't I already give you $13,400 15 years ago?" I countered. "That's a different situation," John insisted. "I can't give you that much money," I firmly refused. John grabbed my collar and threatened me, asking if I wanted to get hurt. It hurt more emotionally than physically, seeing my brother act this way. Just then, someone shouted, "Stop it," and grabbed John's arm. It was Tom, now a strong 20-year-old. Tom easily subdued John, who ended up lying face down on the floor. My brother's wife, seeing Tom all grown up, said warmly, "You've grown so much. I'm your mom. I've wanted to see you." But Tom stood firm, declaring, "My only parents are the mom and dad of this house. I remember the terrible things you did to me when I was just 5. I felt love for the first time when I came here. You are not my parents." Even after Tom's heartfelt words, John and his wife didn't seem ready to give up. So I showed them the agreement we had made 15 years ago. It clearly stated, "We will have no future involvement with the child. If we fail to comply, legal action will be taken. You've broken your promise." "I'm calling the police," I stated firmly. They looked visibly shaken, trying to make excuses that they had forgotten about the agreement. In reality, we're being chased by debt collectors. Without $33,500, we're in serious trouble. Please don't be so heartless. Help me out, sis. You're well off, right? John pleaded. Despite his earlier threats, now he was begging. "I can't help you. The moment you abandoned Tom, you lost any connection with me as well. You're no longer my brother," I said firmly. "Please," John begged, desperate and defeated. I firmly rejected John's pleas. Helping him would only enable his behavior to persist. As their insistence continued, I was on the verge of calling the police when they reluctantly left. Later, I learned that the couple had been arrested for shoplifting and were now leading a troubled life in jail. Meanwhile, Michael, Tom, and I continued to live peacefully and happily. Seeing Tom's determination to become a doctor and help those in need fills my heart with joy. Thanks to Tom, our days are filled with laughter and contentment. We look forward to continuing our happy life together.